Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Fortune 500 executives, where today we're going to look at how millennial startups and customers are killing the big brands. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you are a regular, then a big thank you to you for being over the 2 million downloads that we've had, making us the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 listeners globally. We are also cited in Inc. magazine very recently as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And we also got cited at G&A as the top 10 podcast for HR and management professionals. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody that you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching or listening to this show, you're either a high-level executive, an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or a leader in some capacity. And as leader, in whatever those forms are, if you've even been a casual listener or viewer of the show, you know that being a leader is no longer simply a position or a title, it's a brand within a brand. That if your company's brand goes down, there's a very good chance that your personal brand can sink with it. And it's that your brand must have this delicate balance between being robust and being agile. My guest today is Nicole Ertas. She is recognized global brand strategist, an author, a speaker who's helped build some of the most recognized and powerful brands there is. She has been embraced by companies such as Beam, Wrigley, SC Johnson, Mike's Hard Lemonade, Johnson & Johnson, General Mills, Kraft, and a whole bunch of other ones. Nicole's success in global innovation and brand leadership has gained her recognition in Forbes, in the New York Times, and she was selected as Crain's Chicago 40 Under 40. She's also the founder and president of Ertas Group, a distinguished network of provocative thinkers, strategists, innovators, and creative change agents who help global brands cultivate, validate, and activate cutting-edge brand strategies. You know, the advancements in technology, in particular social technology, has arguably changed the industry of branding more than any other industry. And as a leader, we must grasp what this means to our companies and to ourselves. Nicole Ertas is the author of a brand new book right here called Free Range Brands. And it's a book that speaks to the vastly changing landscape of branding and that many of the smaller brands have the agility that is just killing the bigger brands. So please put your hands together and welcome Nicole Ertas. Woo! Are you ready? Oh, where's the applause? Come on, crowd. Ready? Go. Okay, now we're talking. Yeah, thank you. A bit more. Good. Welcome, Nicole. Good to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Sorry for the delay. The audience were a little delayed.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's a time difference because you're East Coast and West Coast. That's what it is. Well, thanks for joining us. It's great to have your book here in front of me. You and I have had a couple of conversations. We had a conversation before. Let's start at the basics because the book is called Free Range Brands. What does free range brands mean? Because I'm sure it's not free range chickens, although there is some feathers on the cover. What does it mean to be a free range brand versus what? I don't know what the other term would be.
I'll call it a tethered brand.
A tethered brand. Okay. What's a free range brand?
Of a legacy brand, but not necessarily. But a lot of the whole idea of free range brands came about because as you mentioned, I've worked for these big global companies for 20 years now. And many of the brands that they have were built in an era where everything was very controlled. The media, the distribution, product placement, the messages, the creative, the innovation, everything was in a controlled environment. And so to learn how to build these big brands, and the companies that are institutionalized around building these big brands are really in an era of control. And they're still operating in those modalities because that's the way they're set up. That's the way they were brought to life. And that's what gave them their scale. And that's what they maintain today. Although the fact is now, the smaller brands, the brands that are more nimble and agile and more responsive to unpredictability, used to not be threatening to these brands because these big brands could still own their space through their methods of control. But as we know today, that's not the case. And so the question becomes, how do these smaller brands that are really navigating today's landscape, how are they starting to really bring down some of these big brands? And many of my big brand clients are looking to them to try to figure out what are they doing that we need to be doing. And basically I call those the free range brands because they've kind of escaped this modality of being tethered and controlled and one way and top down. It's a whole different way of brand building.
Well, I think there's also two pieces to this, which is, the company itself that has a brand and the organizations that perpetuate a brand. Most people had a glimpse into that old world with the show Mad Men, which was a big budget that was thrown at an advertising agency. But these big brands are struggling now, struggling to stay relevant. Why do you think that is? Why is it so, because they're still throwing way more money at it than a company that's making, say, 3 to 5 million is a vastly different budget than a company that's making 300 to 500 million. So why are they struggling? Because they've certainly got the resources.
They do. And, I work within these organizations. Not only do they have the financial resources, they have great creative agencies. They have intelligent people. They've got everything that they need to do this. But the problem is, again, it's set up in an environment that's still kind of operating on old hardware, so to speak. So you've got an organization that is not only structured, but is educating and training its employees to build brands in a way that worked before social media. They build brands in a way where you had 3 years to do your innovation, where you had 2 years to come up with your one key message and test that for 9 months and then run it over and over and over again for years. That method does not work on social media. You got to be able to say something an hour later, let alone 9, 12 months later. So the challenge that these brands are facing is this unique dynamic of, they've built what we called brand equity. Everything was about establishing and growing your brand equity. And if you think about it, brand equity is really quite inert. It's a very static, stable thing that you build. It's like an investment, and you're either mortgaging it or you're building it. You're always trying to build it. It's like your nest egg of a brand. And the way I look at it now is that you really need to transform that static brand equity into something more dynamic and transactional and responsive. And I call that brand currency. And the thing is that today brands need to balance these two. They need to balance the core and they need to be able to express that in really relevant and dynamic ways.
It's interesting to me because I think you may or may not know, you personally or you the listener, but last year I was invited to speak at the UN. And I spoke with a guy who we were on a panel, and he was an ex-right-wing neo-Nazi, hardcore guy that I'd helped to de-radicalize. And I'm sitting on the stage here, and there's me, and Tony's on one side, who is now the president, runs a group called Life After Hate, who helped form us to come out of that world. And on the other side is Jesse. And Jesse was the lead, recruiter for Al-Qaeda. So he was the lead American recruiter for Al-Qaeda. and next to him was somebody from the British Home Services dealing with terrorism. So there's four of us on this panel, and one of the things that Jesse said that was in total alignment with what you said was, he goes, we could beat you guys every single day because you came up with a strategy and it took you 9 to 12 months to put it out. We'd see your strategy and we'd counter it within 2 hours. Right. And he said, and we did that constantly. And that's an example for me of the government being the big brand, and this Al-Qaeda guy being the small brand, and he's going, yeah, we can turn on a dime at any moment. And I think that if it's a great metaphor to look at, the growth of something very destructive like Al-Qaeda or radicalism, and go, yeah, the reason they're kicking our ass is because we can't turn on a dime. And I think that this is a really interesting metaphor about what you're saying in the context of business. So you're still, they call you these big guys. How do you guide them to say, dudes, you got to spin a heck of a lot faster? How do you get them to grasp that?
Well, I think the one thing we can all agree on is this idea of really getting underneath the human truth behind behavior and really understanding consumer insights. And that is what the foundation of many of these big brands were built on. And so when we speak that language, it can help them understand a little bit how we need to do better. And so what I mean by that is, people like us grew up in an era where we didn't have all these crazy platforms. I mean, as a seasoned, senior marketer, there was TV, print, radio, maybe some outdoor. We didn't have a lot of choices, you know.
Right.
Today, there's a new choice every day, and it seems a bit overwhelming, and you've got so many agencies coming at you, telling you you've got to be here, you've got to be there. And I can imagine, as a brand leader today, and what I see among, many of my clients, is that it's almost paralyzing to determine where you can be, even if you're trying to be responsive and fast. Yeah. The environment is changing faster than the decisions can even be made. And so what I like to tell my clients to do is take a step back and let's take a look at why these platforms are having success. Mm-hmm. And it's not to be on Snapchat or be on Facebook or be on, you got to be here, you got to be there. It's really more about understanding the human truth behind why consumers and the audiences are on those. And I really brought it down to some very core human truths that I think motivate a lot of the behaviors and a lot of the social activity that we see. And once you really start to think about those core human truths, it really provides a much simpler framework for where should I place my, investments versus just constantly chasing new technology.
I want to go into what you've discovered there because that's a really important piece for me. I'm very excited about it. But, one of the things that I wanted to bring up with you first was that on several occasions, I've been asked to assist with a brand. I'm asked to assist with the brand and the marketing of an organization because the smarter brands understand that if they're going to succeed, they better understand the psychology of the customer.
Right.
Do you believe that social media has made that a lot easier because people are, they spill everything, or has it just made it more confusing?
Well, I think it's made it so you have to know what to look for and how to look for it. You have to have a method to the madness because it's so overwhelming that it would be hard to, really focus on what it is you're gleaning. I mean, you could get lost in 1,000 different directions. And this is what we're seeing today in terms of really trying to harness the data that's coming in to be able to understand a lot of big marketers that's really at the top of their list to make sense of all this data because it's overwhelming and it's really challenging to determine, how to use it, where to use it. And it all stems back to your strategy and what you're trying to achieve. But in many cases, it can seem to lead you in so many different paths. It is challenging for a leader to determine which way to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite subjects to study, in fact, I've even built a whole leadership development training based on it, which is archetypes, leadership archetypes. How do each of us have different archetypes that we inherently follow, how those archetypes have their own emotional intelligence, and how they have leadership deficits. You've done something very similar in the context of branding. In your new book, Free Range Brands, you speak about 4 archetypes that bring the brand narrative into the experience of the customer. So I want to break this up into 2 questions first. Because it's so easy for us to slip into jargon, I want to break the jargon right away. So the first thing I want to say is, what does it mean when we say to bring the brand narrative into the experience of the customer? Because that sounds like Madison Avenue talk that somebody who's not part of that world might go, I don't know what that means. Bring the brand narrative into the customer, into the experience of the customer. What does that mean?
I'm really glad you started with this question, because it really unlocks the main difference in how to really become what I call a free range brand. And that is that in the old world, brands were built to be the hero, the feature of the commercial, to talk about what it is the brand does, why it's better, different. And this is the behavior that you see with these brands trying to get into social media. A lot of them are just putting out their own old school message, one-way broadcast, different platform. And really the idea here is to shift the focus to make the consumer the hero. And that's why when we talk about this idea of brand narrative, everybody talks about brand narrative because it's kind of been imposed upon the media that we've got to come up with a brand narrative. And a lot of the clients that I work with go through months and huge expense to develop, some form of a manifesto or a brand narrative. And in the end, it winds up living as a thing in their cubicle, a little write-up or something maybe on the back of a package or something that shows up in the About Us section of a website. It really goes back to being static again. Mm-hmm. And so the whole purpose for developing a brand narrative really isn't to just have your backstory. It's really to allow the consumer to be part of your story and to allow the consumer to be actually the characters of your narrative. And you as the brand are the facilitator of the conversation. So that's really the distinction. It's making your audience activate the narrative, not a one-way, story that I'm now going to broadcast to you and then you can find it on our website.
I think that this is why I wanted to bring it up, because I think it's certainly old school, but it's so common in those brands. When you look at that, for me, one of the great examples of that is Gary Vaynerchuk, who is constantly lives this. I mean, he's become a hero, but his heroism is on making the audience the heroes. As I have, one of our companies is called the Authentic Speaker Academy for Leadership. And one of the first things we teach speakers is, if you're going to go out there and you're going to become a superstar and you're going to make it all about you, you're dead in the water already. Your presentation has to be about how do you make the audience the hero? How do you make them the ability to step into being a hero or being the person who gets the spotlight? And I think that you're absolutely right in that it's like, look at us, we're the best.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, everybody's screaming that.
That's right.
It's one of a million, not one in a million, but one of a million, screaming, look at us, we're the best, we're the cheapest, we're the fastest. You know what? But how do I serve you? What do you want? And everybody in marketing has always known that we've got to ask, what do you want and how can I serve you? But I think what you're putting forward in this book that I think is vital for us to grasp is that we've got to ask, what do you need? How can I make you the hero? You, the consumer. And I think that that's really great. And you broke it into these archetypes that I think is really important. So tell us about each of these archetypes, because I saw them in the book and I went, this is very cool. And it's a way I love things that give people a way to grasp something that is potentially very big, but also potentially very overwhelming. And by bringing it into these archetypes, you've allowed people to grasp it. So let's walk through some of these, because I think people are going to love this.
Okay, thanks. Well, yeah, so I think you bring up the most important point here, and that what these are a way for brands to create entry points to their audience to participate. I think you bring up a good point, too, that we do, as marketers, seek to learn about our consumers. But what we do is we use that to create our message and to create the products. And after that, we go into this like old school way of just pushing out, we're the best, we're the best, we're the best, right? We don't continue the learning and continue the dialogue and the two-way behavior after that. Then it just goes back into this old school one-way model.
Right.
So what these are our 4 archetypes that once many of my clients started asking, how can we, be more like these brands? And I found myself over and over again really just looking at some of the brands that were the smaller brands in a particular category. And over time, what I started seeing was these brands have some very distinct patterns of what they do, and they're very deeply rooted in some human truths that anybody can tackle. Fantastic. And so I've personified those. And these are ways that a brand can create interaction points with their audience. So consumer personas, let's say, are lords, lovers, hackers, and hawks. So lords are the modern day influencer. So in the past, if you speak in big brand language, they want to get a big star or somebody that, maybe even a YouTube star today that has a huge following. But the reality is an influencer, we're all influencers now, right? Everybody's got a Facebook page and you may be a small influencer, you may be a big influencer, but everybody has some form of a following.
Yeah.
And the idea is for a brand to understand that rather than putting their message out there in a broadcast format, they can seed it and allow the key lords, the people who are influencers over their own domain, to discover it, because information is everywhere now. Like you just said, it's everywhere. And when somebody has some information that's special, that has real value. So some brands that are using that rather than, going old school Super Bowl ads where they're just pushing the message out, the idea is to seed it for the right influencers to find it, and then these people's desires to elevate their own status and have insider information to share with their communities. It feels more valuable, and so those would be the lords.
So before we go, let's jump in, because that's good. So that's great. I want to tap into it. So I'm a small brand, and I want to tap into these lords. I obviously can't afford Beyonce as a small business. Who the hell can? So how would I get my message in front of those influencers who have the potential to feed into the right audience for me? How would where would I start?
Well,
with lords?
Actually, what I like to do is start with let me bring in lovers, because I think it's a good starting point.
Okay.
Because once you identify your lovers are the quintessential new consumer. Okay. It's somebody who shares your values. So the idea of having someone who needs what you sell versus someone who shares what you value is it's a huge turning point in how a brand can start to connect with the consumer.
Say that again, because I think that is powerful and they need to hear that again.
If you have a product that you sell, first of all, I don't know how I just said it. A product that you sell it's commoditized. Everybody sells what you sell today, most likely, right? So the difference between a product and its consumers, and the difference is more productized, whereas the difference between values and a shared consumer value is what's going to make a brand. Right. And it's really what's going to elevate you above, always having to be fighting on price or trying to put your message out there louder. The idea is to start with your values and really understand, what are your values? Let's start with, as a brand, what is it that gets you up in the morning? What's your obsession? Many of the big brands weren't built in the era of purpose. So they struggle with this, but they can get there, and they do get there, and they're getting better at getting there, really trying to identify a purpose. But once they identify that purpose, the important thing is to understand who else values that purpose. These are going to be your lovers. Who has those shared values? Now, to answer your question about the lords, once you identify who shares your values, these people can start to be lords for you. So what you can do is, if you're doing something that's unique and different, say you embrace your purpose so well that you're starting to create new avenues for fueling that purpose. Mm-hmm. You can identify the people who share those values and give them insider information to that shared value in what you're doing as a brand. You can invite them to events. You can give them information that isn't otherwise accessible, because if they share your values and you're doing things that give them insider information that they don't have, they're going to want to share those same values out with their groups. So what you're doing is you're starting to systematize a conversation around values versus products.
Can I jump in for a minute on that? Because I see a challenge. I think in my work, a lot of what we do when we go in is we're looking at helping companies to become purpose-focused, right, and purpose-driven. But I got to be honest, not many companies know what their purpose is. Particularly older companies, they've got a mission statement, which is about as useful as toothpaste in the sink. I mean, it doesn't do anything. They don't really know their purpose. And so the values conversation is a construct, that, well, we value this. I mean, we value innovation. Okay, what was the last innovative thing you did?
Yeah.
Now, you did a tweak. That's not an innovation. We value integrity. What does that mean? Well, we say, actually that press thing that came out a couple of months ago shows that you don't have much integrity. So there's sort of contrived values. There's a mission statement that they call their purpose. When you bang up against that and you're asking them to trade on values and to trade on purpose and to create these lovers who become the lords of their brand, what do you do when you bump into that right off the bat? Because there are companies that are very successful. They are Fortune 500 organizations who, and this is my opinion, who will disappear within the next 20 years because they're still believing that because they're Fortune 500, they're going to remain forever. But they're going to disappear because the world is now driven by, as you say, values and purpose. So how do you get them to go, wakey, wakey?
Well, I'm telling you, it's an organizational challenge.
Of course.
It's exactly how you talk about it. It's a challenge from the top. If a company doesn't understand the value of purpose, and many of them don't, many of them I think they're doing it because they've been told they have to do it, so they're just kind of going through the motions. But the idea is that if you don't embody it, that's going to be a problem. It's going to bring you down. And to circle back, that's what I call the hawks. And that's why the hawks are, as another archetype, so important to this conversation. Because the hawks are going to be the ones that are going to make sure you practice what you preach. And if you don't, not only, and we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it everywhere. I mean, you could tell organizations until they're blue in the face. It's not only affecting the brands that they sell, and they know it. They know their brands are in free fall. Let me say that. Mm-hmm. It's also affecting the talent they're able to recruit. Because when a organization doesn't embrace a purpose, not only does that translate into how people view the products, but it translates into the talent you're recruiting or not recruiting. And we're seeing an epidemic now of companies really struggling to become relevant to millennials.
Absolutely. So the hawks are kind of like they're the integrity police.
They are.
Of your brand.
That's right.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me. I mean, of course, in my last book, Fiercely Loyal, I talked about exactly that you can't keep the top talent if you don't have a purpose. And in there, I don't know if it's in that book or it's in an article I recently wrote, where I gave an example and I say Ralph applies for a job at this great company. He's read all the stuff online. They look like a great company. He sees all kinds of stuff on social media. He's a very talented guy and he wants to work there. So he applies to work there. He speaks to the HR person. They're very excited for him to come in. He goes to the front desk. He goes up to the reception, beautiful opening place, and the receptionist is very kind and says, would you like something to drink? He says, yeah, sure, I'd like some water. Would you like it to be cold or room temperature? He goes, cold would be nice. The person reaches underneath the counter and brings him up a plastic bottle of water, hands it to him and says, have a seat. Ralph goes and has a seat. The person behind the desk goes back to work and tells the HR person that he's here. HR person comes out 5 minutes later and says, where's Ralph? Receptionist says, oh, don't know. Maybe he went to the bathroom. No, he didn't go to the bathroom. Ralph was gone. And I actually asked this in boardrooms. Where did Ralph go? And people go, I don't know. Ralph went home. Why? Because Ralph's a millennial. Okay, so what does that mean? He felt entitled to be seen right away? No. you handed him a plastic bottle of water. And the value system of your company on the website was out of integrity with a plastic bottle that said you care about the planet. And he went, okay, you're a bunch of liars and I'm gone. Now, back in my generation, we would have gone, oh, well, it's probably an oversight. Millennials, what I love about millennials, I say this all the time, millennials are baby boomers with balls. They just, you know what? You're out of integrity. I'm gone. See ya. And you know, so I think that in many ways, because millennials grew up watching big companies shaft, watching the big banks shaft the customer, shaft the worker. Their dads, their moms worked there 25 years. They bought the brand consistently, and then they showed this nasty undercurrent that they don't trust. And I think there's an element of that hawk archetype you're talking about in all millennials, and I love it. I think it's great because it says you better have authenticity, you better have integrity, you better have you better be on.
That's right. They're going to save this planet.
Yeah,
I believe it because we're at a point where we need a whole generation to be that serious about it. Mm-hmm. And I think it frustrates a lot of more senior leaders that are of a different generation. I think it's challenging for them. But I challenge them to change. The organizations need to change. We need to really practice what we preach, because I think what we're seeing now is organizations preaching more because they feel that that's going to, you know, get them what they need from a sales perspective, but still struggling to really live the purpose.
Yeah. I think it's, these are great archetypes because it allows people to see that. The fourth one is, what's the fourth one?
Hackers are hackers. Hackers want to be involved. They want to get their hands on your brand. So back in the old day when consumers, if you think about the word consumer, it's so passive. It's like, I'm going to eat what you give me. I'm just going to be spoon-fed, you know? And hackers is the mentality that says, this brand is for me. I have every opportunity to be able to shape it. And you should interact with me. So whether it's I can co-create with you or even I can tweet you and you'll tweet me back, that's expected. And the brands that are still kind of in this old school model of like, we put it out there and then you'll either buy it or you won't, and we won't really respond or interact with you. That's just a model that's a huge missed opportunity and quickly becoming cost of entry. So, between really having those values for lovers, seeding your message versus pushing it for lords, inviting interaction for hackers, and practicing what you preach and be true to your purpose for the hawks. If a company can start to think about those core pieces of the puzzle, whether it's on Snapchat or Facebook or how it's working, that will unfold. That will unfold very naturally once you start to define what your strategies are and how you're going to invite your consumer to participate with your brand.
So let's walk this back, because I love these archetypes. I love them when I read about them in your book. I thought they were great. I love that they make it graspable for people. As I said, it can be very confusing. But let's walk it into two distinct groups. The C-suite leader, so maybe not necessarily the CEO or the president, but the CFO, CMO, CIO, all those kinds of C-suite individuals. What's the practicality of this for them? Let's go to them first. What's the practicality? Like, what can, if I'm the CMO, or CMO is pretty obvious, I guess, but this, the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, or the CFO, where do I need it? Because I think that the reason I'm saying this, I just want to bring this home first to make it clear. I think there's a huge mistake in each of those titles, because each of those titles make us think we're not in marketing. Each of those titles make us think we're not in sales. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're a leader in your organization, you're in marketing and you're in sales. That's all there is to it. You gotta, you may have to take care of all the finances because you're the CFO, but you're also in marketing and sales. And I know how uncomfortable people are with that. And you're in those things because you're part of a brand and you represent the brand. So that's why I want to see if we can bring this home to those people so they can, because they go, well, this is a very interesting conversation, Dov, but I'll put my marketing guy on listening to it, rather than I want to make sure you as the CFO are listening to it.
Yeah, I'm actually working on another book now called Free Range Organizations, because the whole guts of this book starts with the idea that remember how we started this conversation. It's not the people, it's not the talent, it's not the money, it's not the brains, it's the organization. And these organizations were built 50 years ago where a different set of behaviors and a different way of being worked.
Sure.
Today it doesn't work that way. We're in a knowledge economy now where what we need to do in terms of who we bring into these organizations, they need to be empowered. They need to be able to make decisions on the fly. We're navigating complex global environments that are changing rapidly. We have millennials coming in that say, I want to have an impact on day 2. And we have senior leaders that are saying, oh, they're so entitled. They need to work their way up. I challenge an organization to say, invite the person who wants to have an impact on day 2. Just figure out what that impact is.
Absolutely.
Restructure your organization to do that. So when I go underneath, we talked about lords, lovers, hackers, hawks. That's kind of a very engaging way to create marketing programs. But when we think about the divisional leader level, and we think about building organizations and recruiting talent, because ultimately that purpose, that structure is what's going to become embodied in your brand. And it's going to be seen by the hawks, who are going to be making sure that you live by who you are and that you're not getting that plastic bottle of water, right, at the front desk. So the 4 underlying human needs are these needs for self-expression, a need to influence, a need for truth, and a need to be relevant. And those needs penetrate how we activate those lords, lovers, hackers, hawks with our brands. They also penetrate how we recruit employees, and activate our organizations. Mm-hmm. So bringing our organizations into the economy where we're giving people the opportunity to self-express, giving people the opportunity to believe they're working somewhere that has an authentic purpose, that shares those values that we talked about, that their day isn't just about a paycheck and about, being somewhere for the rest of their lives. Millennials don't expect to spend more than 2 years at an organization. They're all about exploration and self-actualization. They're not there to make the company ride into the sunset. So we have to stop approaching this way.
Absolutely.
So the idea that they can have purpose and that they're working somewhere with purpose, a bigger purpose, that they can have impact, I mentioned that, and that they can be relevant, that their voice can be heard quickly, that they don't have to wait until they're at the C-suite to have a seat at the table. They want to be heard today. This is the generation that wants to be seen and heard.
Yes.
They're posting selfies and broadcast yourself and follow me. This is a generation that's all about self-expression. And so if we don't give them the opportunity to express these values, we're missing a huge opportunity as an organization, and also in the way we structure our marketing programs.
It's interesting because, if you look back at shows like Mad Men, which were very good at actually saying what was going on in those days, often the question was, how do we get the customer to tell us what they really like? How do we get that was always the conversation. How do we get to find out what's really working for the customer? And we all lapped up Mad Men, certainly for the sexual behavior of the lead character. That was all very interesting. But for people like me and you, because I watch it with other things in mind as well, wow, you've been given the gift that the customer will tell you at every possible turn. And not only the customer, but your employees will tell you at every possible turn. And most of those large organizations are going, well, you don't know. You don't understand. Okay, you want our input, and I say this all the time to leaders, because I work with leaders, and I say, you want input as long as it agrees with you. That's right. Well, that's not input. That's a sycophantic behavior. So having some yes man, yes woman is not feedback. And feedback sometimes sucks. Sometimes it's not what you want to hear. But we live in a world of branding and marketing and all those kinds of things where people will voluntarily tell you don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars building focus groups. You can put something out on Facebook and they'll tell you in an hour. Right? And it may suck, but it'll stop you spending millions of dollars in the wrong direction. How do you get them to listen? Because getting the consumer and the things to speak is one thing. Getting them to listen is another.
I wish I could tell you how to get them to listen. I do. I face the same challenge you do. I think the way I look at it is, you know what? If they can't tell by the free falling numbers, if they can't tell by the dying distribution channels, if they can't tell by the fact that a lot of other brands are preferred greatly over their brand and they're pretty much like relying on scale and dominance of a dying channel, if all of these things aren't enough, I can tell you what you need to do and I can tell you how to do it, but it's your choice if you want to listen.
Right.
And I hear you. I feel I experience the same thing. In fact, the book, if you didn't gather the energy out of it, was somewhat frustrated. Like, sure. People, you need to listen, like the last page of the book is adapt or die.
Yep.
They're dying and they still don't want to listen. I think what it comes to is an internal aversion to risk. The people that we have at the top, their focus is on moving on up and out. They don't want to reinvent the whole organization. And frankly, they probably don't know how because it's such a challenging, tumultuous time. So I think it comes down to like a huge amount of risk aversion. But what we're seeing is you can take risk in smaller pieces and you will be rewarded because there is such a thirst for change. There's very few companies are making it to the list of companies millennials want to work for.
Exactly.
That's why they all want to work for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Definitely more entrepreneurial. I was working with a leader last week. As you know, I mentor leaders, and I was working with a leader last week. I think it's safe for me to say that he works for IBM. He's a big hitter at IBM. And I said, you have to think about, I was saying to him, and this is an important message for all of us here. I said, the conventional wisdom, and it was actually a saying back in the 80s and 90s, which is nobody got fired for hiring IBM.
Right.
Well, guess what? You might now.
Right.
You might now. If they're not moving fast enough, if they're not flexible enough, you might indeed get fired. And so, this leader I was working with is an under 40 leader, so he's in the millennial bracket, who is doing extraordinary things and banging up against this wall of that's not how we do things around here. And I say to companies, if those words come out of your mouth, if you've got a millennial in front of you who every third word is the F-bomb, and you're saying that's not how we do things around here, one of you is swearing way more than the other, and it's the one saying that's not how we do things around here anymore. Because that is the language of goodbye, I'm out of business.
Right.
And it's like, grasp that. And particularly, I think, you would know even more than I do because of some of the brands you've worked with, that clinging to that's not how we do things around here. We've been in business for 100 years. And I'm like, that's fantastic. There are people who lived in the plains of Africa for thousands of years. They're not going to do well in Manhattan.
Right.
You can't say, well, we've survived for 2,000 years. This is a completely different environment. As you just said, you either adapt or you die, and you got to grasp that. Let's flip it over for a minute, because we talked about C-suite individuals. How do we get sales leaders, which this show is very popular with, and entrepreneurial leaders, how do we get them to what's the practicality for them in the context of what it is you're saying around the free-range brands and the archetypes?
Yeah. Well, I think for this audience, it's a lot better because I do find that they're looking for information. They're saying they're more in a responsive mode. Like, what can we do that's different? And they're a little bit more on the front lines, and they need to be more thrifty and responsive by nature. Sales needs to be more responsive. Entrepreneurs need to be more responsive. C-suite individuals generally tend to be less, responsive. So
how very PC of you.
So for them, it's really about, finding ways to understand how they can bring these values forth. If they can't, let me say for an entrepreneur oftentimes has a lot better story to say, what's your purpose? What's your obsession? Why did you do that? In fact, younger brands, service, product, personal brand, it doesn't even matter. They often, were born of passion, whereas a big company was probably born more out of function and, white functional market space. So it's harder for them to reverse engineer a purpose than a younger organization. So I think this is a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. Really put your purpose forward. I think what some entrepreneurs tend to fall into the trap of is they mirror the conventional marketing that they see in the world. And so they tend to just talk product, talk function, rather than talk values, rather than do all the things we're talking about here. And the thing is that for them, this is their chance to do that and not to follow. Don't follow these big companies. They're not leading you to a good place. Bring your passion forward. Bring your values forward. Identify, how you can create communities and bring consumers, even a small number of consumers to start that are very passionate about what you do and why you do it. They're going to start to spread out. They're going to become your lords, and giving them opportunities to interact, whether it's interaction through like what we're doing here, like just social interaction, find a partner that based on your values that you might not necessarily talk to in your functional message. So if you sell glass cleaner, you don't only have to talk to people. I'm just making this up right now.
Sure.
You don't only have to talk to people who need glass cleaners and focus on that functionally. You can broaden it to something like, I want to see clearly. I want to breathe freely. And now start thinking about it in that regard and who else might share values that you share. And now you can start having a values discussion, but you can also start having your conversation with different people. Your product will make its way to where it needs to be. The product is almost the last piece of the puzzle. It's about connection. And so finding those entry points through these archetypes will help sales folks and entrepreneurs create those connections.
It's part of what I talk about, of course, is full Monty leadership and like stripping it down and revealing. And, here you are, we do leadership. Here you are, your background is in the world of branding, marketing, and those kinds of things. We've had people on who are high-level entrepreneurs. We have people who provide service. We have people who are CFOs, presidents, all those different things. And people go, but it's a leadership show. Shouldn't you just be focused on leadership? And I say, no, it's actually a leadership show that's about going full Monty. It's like looking underneath. And I want leaders in any form, whatever it is, to look at those who are willing to go, what's underneath? What's underneath that? What is it that drives something? My obsession my entire life has been the why of something.
Yeah.
Right? The why, and that's not just purpose, but the why of anything. Like, why is that? I mean, I was that kid who drove my parents mad because I would always say, why? 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 I remember getting thrown out of a science class because they said something. I said, well, why is that? And they were, well, why is that? And eventually got thrown out of class for disrupting the class, for being seen as a trouble causer, because all I was doing was asking why. And I wasn't trying to be an obnoxious little turd. I just was like, I wanted to know. I want to know why. And that's really what this is about. It's the common value of somebody sharing that why piece for whatever it is they do. And I think that's the message that you're giving us here, is to find that common value piece between, because this is, I talked about it in my last book, in Fiercely Loyal, is that this is the generation of collaboration. But collaboration means you have to, first of all, collapse the idea of competition. Means I collaborate with people in my field who should be, quote unquote, in the old world, my competitors. I collaborate with them, want to collaborate with them, because how can we bring more service? How can we bring more value? But I also want to collaborate with people who don't seem to have any particular tie-in to what it is that I'm doing. So I'm in a collaboration process right now with somebody in the health food world, not because of any business deal, but because I've been involved personally in health and fitness for 40 plus years. I'm very big on understanding nutrition and health and all that. There's a collaboration of me as the human being with the brand. And this is, what I'm loving about what you're saying is you got to go to, how do we get underneath a little bit rather than just going, oh, well, we're in window cleaning, so we should talk to people in the glass world. We should talk to people in the glass coffee table world. We should talk to people in the windows business.
Right.
What else?
Yeah.
The values piece, I just love that. I think it's really important. Great to hear.
The thing is is when we circle back to why even do this, why, and I think this is where a lot of the senior leaders fall out, like, okay, I did it. Why? What does it do for me? How does it build my business?
Right.
Well, the thing is, what brands and organizations need to balance is two very distinct polarities. And that is the idea of being both authentic. You have to be, the new order now is you have to be true and authentic to what you say. We talk about that with the Hawks, the real purpose. You have to have a purpose, and it has to be solid and constant. But you also have to be not only timeless, but trendy, right? You have to be relevant. You have to be able to engage in social media, whatever's going on every day, over and over and over again. So how do you balance those two without completely losing your way? And so the idea is that if you do it based on values and you don't do it based on product, values is going to allow you to know where your come from is and participate in endless conversations because you'll have a point of view about it. Whereas if you come from, I sell glass, how in the world am I going to navigate social media with that?
But don't you find that people, again, we're still coming back to this though, and I'm sorry for bringing it back, but it's my experience that most people, even if you say that to them, it's still a confusing point because even at a human level, most people don't know what they value. They don't know they know what they consume. They know that they should value certain things. They should value family time. They should value, whatever it is. But I don't know that most people even know what it is that they value. In the work that I do, I work with people who are extraordinarily successful. And I sit down with them and it's clear to me how much they've lost their way in the sense of values and knowing what matters to them. How do you deal with that when you bump into that at this level of branding?
Well, I think that from a human perspective and what you're talking about and what people value, I think that's where we think the millennials hopefully are going to save us. I do believe that it tends to be more of a generational thing because, nothing against like boomers, but oh my goodness. So sorry. The boomer generation, I think, saw a lot of material success, especially the younger boomer generation.
Yeah.
And I think what we see in a lot of what millennials grew up with and what a lot of people grew up with that are, millennials, Gen Z, and the younger generations, Gen X, I guess to a degree, they're a little bit more of a blip. But the idea being that they're rejecting more experience. They're rejecting products over and favoring experiences. They're rejecting monetary value and favoring, more substantive, purposeful value and change. So ultimately, I think what we are seeing is a transformation and more of an emergence of values. And we're seeing that in organizations and in brands. And ultimately, I think that's why so many companies need to recognize that this is important enough that they can't just keep neglecting it out of it. I don't see how it ties to my brand plan. I don't see how it ties to selling product because ultimately this is where people are winding up.
Absolutely. So as we talking about winding up, as we come to the end of the show, I want to ask you this full Monty question, which is, do you need a moment?
No.
Okay. To ask you what it is on a crappy day, because we all have them, what is it on a crappy day that gets you out of bed? On a day when it would be far easier to pull the blankets over your head and go, oh my, I've had enough of these old farts who don't want to change, or these old companies that don't want to move. What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What is it that gets you going when it would be easy to feel beaten?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question, because in our field, it is easy to feel that way, because I do feel that what we want to bring forth is such a big change, and big change is really hard to affect, especially when you're up against big organizations that have, in many ways more reason not to change than they have to change, because the people that are making those decisions are the people that have a lot to lose if they're going to make those changes. But for me, I think I like to get my message out because I think it helps smaller startups. I think it helps people, are calling me all the time saying, what am I going to do? And people who want to actually bring something forth, whether it's a product or a service or even an idea or a value, it's so energizing when you can actually see the effect. So sometimes for me, I can see the effect on my smaller clients much more, it's much more empowering and exciting than seeing than laboring through the bureaucracy and the non-effect with the larger clients. And I think the big companies can benefit from it, and I'll continue to say it, but ultimately for me, it's the smaller, more entrepreneurial clients that I think really bring me value in what I do.
Yeah, I'm so with you. I love that piece when you're sitting with somebody like that IBM guy I told you about, sitting with him and and him struggling with knowing what the value should be versus what they are, and then suddenly going, and he goes like, and it's so often I see that cringe look on the face. Well, this is what really matters to me. It's like this is a dirty secret, and they reveal that, and the moment of revealing that is like it's such a relief, and I go, everything has to trade on that. The job you go for, the organization you run, the brand you put out there. When you get that central, this is what matters most to me. Like you said, then those people become allies with you. They become lovers of what it is because there's this shared thing, and people have got to pay attention to this. I love what you said. It's been wonderful what you shared, and I love the archetypes. I think they're really easy for people to grasp. Anybody can stop and go, okay, because it's a formula. I mean, you follow each of those pieces in putting your brand forward. I think you've got something really nailed there. Thank you so much. It's been great. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, potentially hiring you to work with their company or to speak, and particularly about the book and where they can get a hold of the book and all the above.
Thank you. Well, everything is Free Range Brands, so you can go to freerangebrands.com. You can find the book on Amazon at Free Range Brands, or you can follow me at Free Range Brands, or even Nicole Ertas, which is my name, and you'll find as the author of the book. So either one and any of the above, I would love to connect. Thanks so much.
Again, thank you so much, Nicole. It's been great having you here. And thank you, listener, for tuning in. And I really do hope, as always, that you don't just listen, but that you actually put it in action. Don't just have it on in the background. Go out, get the book. It's a great book. It's easy to read. It's laid out simply. I really like that. It was an easy way to read. You can grasp this. Listen to this show again. Take notes on it. And as always, I encourage you to reach out to Nicole, to reach out to our guests. We have phenomenal guests. Reach out to them and tell them the value they've added to you and how you're going to put it in action. And so, as always, remember, the research consistently shows that the companies that get to the top and stay there are all purpose-driven. If you're truly serious about having laser beam clarity about your company's purpose, building a culture of high-performing, highly engaged, authentic leaders who are fiercely loyal, then reach out to me, Dov Baron, at fullmontyleadership.com. Because we're here to provide you with the essential leadership skills for today's good leaders who are committed to becoming great leaders of tomorrow while growing their people and the bottom line. And by the way, if you believe for a moment that soft skills aren't as important as hard skills, you might want to remember this, that everything that was ever built was built on a solid foundation. And what did they pour into that foundation? Concrete. Concrete starts off soft. FullMontyLeadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Also, remember to get yourself over to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, where you can get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment, valued at $197, absolutely free for tuning in. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, take yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Until next time, this is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com, saying, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious how you can have a greater level of agility in putting together those 4 archetypes for your brand. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am out.